Welcome back to the 40 Side Podcast. I have an amazing guest in the house with me tonight. We have been laughing here quite a bit before the show even starts. Mr. Dave Saunders. How you doing?
Great. Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay, so let me get a little bit of your bio out here. So, your career has been like right on the bleeding edge of some of the biggest technology shifts in our lifetime. You were in the early days of the internet. You helped build the first commercial software that connected people into that newfangled internet thing that at the time most people didn't even know how to understand it yet. You helped develop the first commercial Wi-Fi hotspot at Bell Labs, which today is so ambiguous that we don't even think about them anymore. And over the past 30 years, you've brought more than 40 products into the world in software, AI, and now surgical robots, including the creation of a microsurgical robot that just received FDA clearance. And you are everything I love about our generation. You lived in those moments where something went from impossible to experimental into everyday reality. We are the generation that watched sci-fi become sci, and you are right on the edge of that. So I know I asked you here today because I want to talk about surgical robots, but dude, there's so much more.
It's a lot of fun, and you're so right. Not to toot the horn of our generation too hard, but I grew up with this concept of if you thought of something, the next question was, well, okay, so how are you going to do it? My older brother, and especially like there's the whole Gen X stereotype of like we never admitted we were bored because then your parents would be like, oh, I'll find something for you to do. So you found your own thing to do.
Yeah.
My brother literally built a rotating observatory on a hill in upstate New York. And he only had a 10-speed bike, so he had to take the lumber one piece at a time on his 10-speed up the hill and deliver. It took him a couple of months, and he finally built a platform with a curved dome and had his own little area for watching his telescope and protection from the wind, and had a weight system to do an automatic rotation in the evening. And how did he learn how to do that? I don't know, by looking at the ones that already existed and went, well, how do they possibly work, right? And I had the same experience with computers. My first, early computers were as with you, just kits that were shooting sparks out practically. And if you wanted to do something with it, you had to learn how to write code and make it do something. And that's just the way it was. And I've really taken that philosophy forward for decades now, where kind of my superpower is I get weird stuff thrown at me. Hey, we need to do this, and it's like either I figure it out or I figure out enough that I can then find people to come in as a team, and then we do the thing. And it's been a lot of it. You mentioned the Wi-Fi, which is just a funny story if we want to tell it sometime, but. We literally got my group in Bell Labs literally got a phone call from Steve Jobs where he was about to launch the new iMac, and he said, I just found out that there's no such thing as a wireless modem. So you guys apparently hold all the patents. I need you to build something in 6 months. I'm going to have you guys call John Ives. He'll make the plastic, but you guys have to make the innards because you own the patent. So we'll work out a deal, but you guys need to get this done before the Macworld launch. And at the time, nobody was thinking about home-based wireless networking. We didn't even have the word Wi-Fi yet. And then suddenly, Steve Jobs calls I had this 50,000 square foot skunkworks facility. I didn't even turn in a budget. Anything I did just got paid for. It was really kind of a weird time for somebody who was, pretty young at the time. And so we're just like, Steve Jobs didn't even ask us to do it. He told us to do it. And we're just like, okay. And then just suddenly, whiteboards are getting slid out on rollers, and we're just okay, what are we going to do? What do we have? It's kind of like the whole Apollo 13 moment, right? What do we have already on hand, and how do we put it together to make it work? And just to finish that anecdote off really quickly, if you find one of those old Apple airports that look like a little flying saucer, if you crack it open, The first edition plastic actually has my entire team's names etched into the bottom plastic, and the actual device itself is a Lucent wireless 802.11 PCM CAA card, 1 megabit per second. That was the maximum speed for wireless networking at the time. And we built a PCM CAA to Ethernet bridge with an FPGA implemented router, and we pounded this thing out in 6 months. Half of them are hand soldered, and we just zip, and it works. And it's kind of a funny thing because one of my guys left Lucent and went and took over networking at Apple, and he invented the Time Capsule, the Airport Express, and the Airport Extreme. And they allegedly were the products that Tim Cook hated more than anything in Apple because they were so reliable that once you bought one, you never needed to refresh it. And there used to be online groups where people would post their uptime for the Airport Express, and my personally, I had one that ran for 5 years, never rebooted. The only reason it came down was because I moved.
Wow.
But that's what we did. We just built stuff, and we saw the vision, we saw what we needed to do, and we just figured it out from there.
So you didn't start there. Obviously, you started before. How did you end up in technology? What was it that,
Yeah,
I mean, you talked about your brother up on the hill. I mean,
yeah.
I had an older brother too, and you got an older brother. You kind of, but when did you when did you wake up and go, I want to be a tech? Because in our
Well,
generation, it was very different.
I kind of fought it. So I had my first computer when I was like 12, and then when I was 16, a friend of mine in high school and I just kind of like just started going, there was somebody down the road who needs like they want like a basic like invoicing system for they just bought an Apple II. He offered me, $500 if we write it. Okay. So, so we wrote an invoicing system. Next thing we know, we're like in business writing software. And my brother then at that point had moved out to the West Coast. He was working for a group that was actually subcontracting to Commodore, doing Amiga system level software. So I would go out there in the summers, and I'm writing software for the Amiga, and so it just kind of got in my blood. But when I went to college, I officially was declared as an art major. I was TAing. I TA'd a typography course, so I've actually designed my own fonts. And to pay for school, I was assistant art director for a commercial print house down the road, and so I'm doing computer art with like, the first Mac that came out that was color. And so we're I'm doing digital art, Illustrator 88, a beta version of Photoshop 1.0, and I just so I'm getting dragged back into technology, right? It's just like I'm trying to resist it, and it just keeps pulling me back because I wasn't scared of it. I could deal with it, and then that friend from high school, he graduated from MIT, and he started working for a startup. I didn't know what a startup was in Herndon, Virginia, and he keeps calling me, and he's like, Dave, you got to come work for this place. There's only four of us right now. You'd be employee number five, and it's a really tiny company, which means that everybody really has to like just do whatever needs to be done, and that's kind of your thing. Because we need somebody to write documentation. You can take tech support calls. You can do the design for the packaging. He's like, just come out. And so I ended up moving to Virginia, and we're making Telnet for defense contractors, $295 a copy. And we are making millions. In fact, in 1992, we rented the Air and Space Museum for a party. Now, technically, you can't use the word rent. It was a private reception to thank us for our generous donation. And we had Paramount licensed Klingons in full makeup passing out hors
Oh,
d'oeuvres at the Air and Space Museum.
uh,
It was awesome. It was so cool. And so here I am, like, in 1990, didn't even know what TCP/IP or the internet, any of
Right.
that stuff was. 6 months later, I'm participating in the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force. And 2 years after that, I'm actually technical chair and marketing chair for two different protocols that I co invented for the International Telephony Union. So I'm just in the deep end of the pool and just having a ball. And I ended up inside of Lucent Bell Labs through acquisitions, and it was a great time. And then after I moved on from Lucent, as 167,000 of my best friends did when we all got laid off, which was a 5 year process of layoffs. Um, I I got invited to help commercialization. At this point, I'd already helped bring out about 30 different products. Some of them are hardware based, most of them are software. But I knew both sides of the fence. And so I was asked to work with a group at the University of Nebraska Medical Center on a surgical robot. And that was my first taste of like surgical navigation and surgical planning. It was a blast. And then in 2016, I co-founded a surgical robotics company. We licensed a surgical robot from Johns Hopkins, and I built the whole technical staff. I was the lead contact with the FDA for our clearance process. I actually set up two cadaver studies, which I never, as a kid, thought I was ever gonna be like picking heads out of a freezer, going, "Is this one got the anatomy I need to do the cadaver study?" Never thought any of that kind of stuff was in my future,
Ooh.
and got FDA clearance for a microsurgical robot, and it was a blast. And over that past about 15 years, I've had the just absolute honor with working with some of the top minds in kind of next generation surgery, surgical robotics, computer vision, AI. And so I've been like right in the middle of the hornet's nest for that kind of technology development. And so it's been like the internet all over again. Like here I am in a brand new, let's just figure it out technology area. And it's exciting to be able to kind of like reboot that whole kind of story narrative and go, I'm getting to do this twice in my lifetime.
Like I said, that's one of the great things about our generation is that we got to see sci-fi become sci. I was talking with an expert the other day, and I said, I'm waiting to the point that I get my food replicator. I'm a diehard Star Trek, and
Oh yeah.
he said it's not far off. It's like
I'm
what?
I'm waiting for that. Like
I'm
like
in.
like with fusion right now, like we're doing like these fusion studies, and we're getting really good. We're getting to the point where they're turning on fusion reactors and they're getting more energy out than goes in, and that's important. Now you need to sustain it. But the other problem is the current version of helium that they're using as a fuel, there's a tiny amount of it on Earth. So it's like at some point it's going to be gone. And then it's like, well, then what do you do? Well, hopefully you'll have learned how to then take hydrogen or existing helium, hopefully hydrogen, because helium. There's a reason why balloons are getting so expensive. We're running out
Yes,
of helium, right?
helium. Yeah.
So protons are real cheap. So let's take all the hydrogen or all the hydrogen and make our own helium. And that's like the first step. We start doing that, and now we're actually making matter. And it's just that boggles my mind. And
Yeah.
if I could get involved in that somehow, I'd be like, yeah,
Well,
okay.
you sound like a guy who spent your career getting ahead of the curve. I was saying in the beginning that you were on the edge. I don't think that's true. I think you were before the edge.
I really love to see what's coming next. When I was involved in the internet, you still had to have a security clearance for about half of it. And all we had from a social media standpoint was network news, Usenet. The web didn't exist. In 1992, I beta tested the CERN web browser for Tim Berners-Lee, which was basically Apple's HyperCard made for the internet. A lot of people don't realize that. And I told Tim Berners-Lee, I wish I still had this email. I said, "This is stupid." I said, the protocol is so heavy. I said, nobody's going to use this. I said, I can go to Telnet, I can use Waze, I can use Gopher. I said, this just doesn't make any sense, man. And he didn't respond for like 3 days, and I thought I'd pissed him off. Um, he told me many months later that he was actually just laughing at me, but he sent me a really polite email, and he goes, I think you need to like sit down and think about it a little bit more, because he goes, I know things that you talk about, and I know it excites you. He goes, and I think you just need to like sit down and think more about it. And he was right, because what's exciting to me about the internet, and this relates to what excites me about surgical robotics, is not that, it's about connecting a bunch of computers. Because remember, the internet started as a Cold War project. It was about networking nuclear missile silos together so that they could coordinate a launch, in retaliation. Um, if that's all the internet was, I'd go back to the art place and just continue doing my art major stuff, right? But what excites me about the internet is that it connects people. Sometimes not for the better. I get that, but there's a dark side to everything. But the what we have been able to connect is just so amazing. And just the thought that, like, for example, I met people from Usenet that were in Australia, and I got invited to their wedding, and I'd never met them face to face, and that really blows me away. And I also know some people that went through transitions, and I knew them only from the Usenet, and they were always the same people, and it changed the way I look at people in general, where we all have a need, we all have a basic right to just exist, and I think that's wonderful. And when I look at surgical robotics, I feel like everybody has the right to the best technology to take care of their health, and surgical robotics enables that. And I can get into some more details about what I mean by that. But there are some surgeries out there that if you want them done by hand,
Well, let
if
me
you
use,
can,
let me use that as a segue.
sure, sure,
Okay,
sure.
so 2 years ago,
Yeah, yeah.
I went through some pretty crazy medical times.
Uh-huh.
I ended up having a couple of subdural tumors in my spine.
Oh, okay.
And I went through triple laminectomy, intradural surgery. I had a team of 15 doctors lay me out on a table for most of a day
Mm-hmm.
and crack me open and do things inside my body. I went from being afraid I would be paraplegic to absolutely fine within a few months.
Yeah,
And the doctors and the humans that were on that team were a huge comfort to me. Because that was some scary times for
yeah.
me and some scary recovery. I think about a robot doing it, and the techno geek in me and the Star Trek fan in me is like, oh, heck yeah, sign me up. And
Well,
I see the arms of the robot coming down from the ceiling, and I'm in. The
yeah,
human in me goes, oh, I can still hug my doctors who took care of me then. And that human connection was a huge part of it for me. So
yeah,
where's
yeah.
that gap? How do these robots fill that?
So for the most part, most of your surgical robots are enhanced tools for surgeons. So you still have a human being QBing the whole thing, right? The one exception, and I hope no ophthalmologist is watching this and gets pissed at me, is LASIK is the closest surgical robot to coin operated that you can get. Um, 20 years ago, that thing was still kind of, a little bit like people were watching it really carefully. Now it's to the point where you get anesthetized, you put the robot in the right position, you cut open the cornea, and you just let the robot do its thing with the lasers. And it's amazing, and it is possibly the most hands-off robot that there is. The rest of the surgical robots out there really are still they are run by a human, but what they do is take away the variability of the cognitive load and the dexterity challenges associated with complex surgeries. So just to use your example, when you're doing spine surgeries, laminectomies, laminotomies, where you're not cutting away as much. For those who don't know, here's your vertebrae. So you've got this inside surface, um, and you're going to take a burr, and if you're going to do a laminectomy, you're going to actually cut away this portion here. You're going to cut away this portion here, and then you're going to put a cage in to replace that portion of the vertebrae. If you're going to do a laminotomy, you're basically going to shave, and I'm not a surgeon, so anybody wants to like correct my technical details, feel free. But for a laminotomy, I'm effectively going to shave out the inner surface of the lamina, um, and that's going to relieve a lot of compression and tension. But here's the challenge. One, I'm millimeters away from the spinal cord that's running through the middle of the vertebrae. So that's concern number one. Concern number two is how much skin do I have to peel back on your back to get access? Now, if we're going old school, we're pretty much going to like open your back up like we're revealing a trap door, and we're going to just have full view of all of your vertebrae, and it's going to be easier. Not easy, but it's going to be easier. But here's the thing. If I could make a minimal incision and get access to that area of the spine, you're going to heal faster. In fact, in some cases, you may even go home the same day from your spine surgery. To do that, though, so the vertebrae is like this, I'm going to have to cut the skin here, which means I need a longer drill bit that's going to reach all the way in. I'm going to hold it back here, which means my own heartbeat is actually going to put a little flick on the tip of the instrument. A drill, and it's spinning at 40,000 RPM, and I'm going to try to scoop out the little bits of bone and suction it out and do irrigation at the same time, all through a hole at a steep angle like this. Now, I personally know surgeons that can do this. How many spine surgeons, though, can easily and quickly replicate the cognitive load and the dexterity required to do that? And I'm going to tell you the answer. It is far less than 50% of the actual qualified board certified spine surgeons are ready and willing to do minimally invasive procedures. It's harder. That's just the way it is, right? If we take a robot and hold the instrument, I can still, as a surgeon, be in complete control. But now, I can now take this instrument. I can attach the camera to it. I can attach some additional safety devices, maybe even a little ultrasound scanner, so that I know exactly where the bone is and what the density is and all that sort of thing. And now, because the robot is holding the instrument, it can hold a heavier instrument without vibration, and I can now do a minimally invasive procedure, but the surgeon is still in control. The robot has simply given me a better tool to do the job. And to me, that's where surgical robotics absolutely shines. And if let's take our age group here as males. If you were ever faced with a patient X, you need a prostatectomy. We're going to have to remove your prostate. You have three options. One is open surgery. They open you up like a frog in high school. You lose 8 units of blood. They basically scoop out your prostate with a snow shovel. And it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I've said this in front of urologists and nobody corrects me. um, it is not a delicate procedure, and there is a very important nerve that runs through the middle of the prostate, and it is scooped out with everything else. So stuff don't work that you wish worked after that surgery. That's option one, and that is the most commonly available surgery right now for removing your prostate, because it's what everybody that is qualified as a surgeon, they can do it, right? Option number two is minimally invasive prostatectomy, where they basically inflate your abdomen. They put between 4 and 5 small holes in your abdomen, and they stick rods down in. They reach all the way down to your prostate. They dissect the prostate and they remove only the prostate organ and they leave the nerve intact. That surgery was developed at Johns Hopkins, and there are, at any given time, out of 8 billion people on the planet, maybe 2 dozen surgeons that are willing to do that surgery manually. And again, I've said this in front of urologists and nobody corrects me. They're like, maybe it's 3 dozen, but it's not, it's not a lot. Okay. The Da Vinci robot has taken away the cognitive and physical challenges of doing laparoscopic surgery. In the state of California, the last number I saw was that there are roughly 3,000 surgeons in California alone that can use a Da Vinci to do a nerve sparing prostatectomy. The only reason is because the Da Vinci itself has made the actual mechanical and cognitive processes of doing laparoscopic surgery just so consistently easy that they all want to do it with the robot. And so, is it, you know, it's not a robot doing the surgery autonomously, it's a surgeon that has a tool that is just beautiful. The Da Vinci is fun to use. Let me tell you.
I want to jump in here for a minute because I think part of my problem here is one of terminology and lexicon.
Oh, sure, 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 sure.
When someone says to me robot,
Mhm.
my reaction is, well, Cylon. You know,
think
I got
data?
to have the Cylon. But I'm thinking autonomous, operates on its own, thinks
Right.
for itself,
Yep.
conducts everything.
Yep.
What you're explaining to me, to me, doesn't say robot. It says it's an advanced tool that's helping a surgeon, and that's a very different. Why are we calling it a robot?
Okay. Because there are still things that the robot will do kind of for you based on environmental inputs and the fact that it has control over all of the mechanics. So, for example, let me give you a real simple example. So, we take a laparoscopic rod and we insert it into the patient's abdomen. It's about 18 inches long. And if I want to reach way far away, I have to push it all the way in. And if I want to do something close, I pull it out. Now, when I'm trying to move it into position, the end effector here, I need to rotate it around where I entered in the patient. Cognitively, that is really tough to do. The robot does it for you. So it takes some of these cognitively challenging tasks or mechanically challenging tasks, and it uses its inputs and understanding of your environment to do them for you. You still think you're in control, just like power steering on a car, but the robot is really giving you the ability to say, this is where I want to go. And it's then using sensors and the actuators and all those things to then follow your commands. So it's still a robot in that it's a device that responds to environmental conditions to do physical things, but it's working in tandem with the human being to give us the best of both worlds: human cognition and intuition with mechanical precision and computing accuracy. And so by bringing those things together, we end up with a super meta human that can really do things that are amazing. But yeah, I agree. It's not Data. It's not a Cylon. It's not a fully autonomous robot. But to me, I think that's okay for now. Someday, yeah, when we have got Moonbase Alpha, and we better call it that.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. Yeah.
I think it's a moral imperative. um, or if we have a Mars base, how many surgeons are you going to have on site? I mean, remember in the Antarctic, I don't remember how many years ago it was, the one surgeon that was on the entire continent of Antarctica was the person that actually had their appendix burst. And there are pictures that you can find on the internet of this guy operating on himself.
Oh,
He had to take out his own appendix. Now, luckily, that was the kind of surgery that you could do. more or less yourself. I mean, I wouldn't want to, but say you smacked your head while you're out doing your Mars survey, you come back in, you've got a subdural hematoma, um, and you need legitimate brain surgery. Who's going to do it? Uh, at some point, we really do need autonomous surgical robotics, but the technology's not there. And quite honestly, I don't think we have a need for it right now. We've got plenty of surgeons, but what we ultimately want are minimally invasive procedures. Um, and there's a lot of good reasons for that that are to the patient's benefit.
Well,
Um,
if you don't, let me jump in with.
sure, 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 sure.
I think I'm going to go back to me because this was deeply personal to
Yeah.
me. I mean, I went under in that surgery, not sure how much functionality I was going to wake
Oh
up
yeah.
with.
Yeah.
I mean, there were three tumors subdural, and they were scraping nerves to get it out.
Yeah.
Triple laminectomy. I went under with every expectation of what was going to happen when I came out, and
That's a tough surgery.
it was humans who, like 3 months
Yeah.
later, poster child for absolutely not a sign that anything ever happened to
Now,
me.
did they do fusion like pedicle screws to
No,
yeah? No. Okay. So like it was mostly like cages.
yeah,
Okay. 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 Okay.
yeah,
I'm caught up.
yeah, yeah, and like dug in and can't move for a
Yeah.
week, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
15-degree angle in a bed, can't move for a week. Yeah, it
Just
was, it
placing
was,
those cages is
it.
like real. Like I've got nuclear material. I got one shot to place it.
So when being the very personal to me is, man, saying robot, I think scares the hell out of a lot of people. And as we get older, we're the ones going into the knife because the body doesn't last, and we're living longer, so more
Yeah.
surgeries. Um, that's a scary thing.
It is. It is. And so if I could say anything to people watching, I would say, do understand that even though it's called a robot, you're still in the surgeon's hands. And the robots of today are basically giving the surgeon superhuman ability, not necessarily to do more precise surgery, because honestly, if we go in, that's a whole topic of like, what does more precise surgery even mean in the first place? That's a weird can of worms. What you want is consistent surgery. You want the surgeon. Most surgeons do like these 12 to 18-hour shifts. Like they do surgeries on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then the other days are office hours, paperwork, all that crap, right? So that means they might be doing between 6 and 8 procedures in a single day, unless they've got a marathon procedure like yours, right? So if you're going to go in there at, say, 10 in the morning, your surgeon has probably already done 4 surgeries. They're going to be a little bit fatigued. They're worn down. They're not going to do a surgery if they're not able to do it safely. But at the same time, let's just think about it. What's the performance curve look like? Right? I want bright eyed and bushy tailed 5 a.m. surgeon, not, oh my God, I can't believe I got to do this last surgery of the day at 5 p.m. Right? I want bright eyed and bushy tailed surgeon all the time. And that's what surgical robotics can help deliver, is a consistent performance curve by lowering cognitive load. If I'm not like burning half of my brain just controlling instruments, for some of these surgeries, imagine the instrument is 40 centimeters long. My heartbeat back here is flicking the end of the instrument. And in the textbooks for microsurgery, there are techniques for managing that hand tremor. That hand tremor is not because you're old, it's because that's how nerves and muscles work. And so you have to learn how to like not counterintuitively don't hold your breath. There's all kinds of weird stuff that you have to learn to just control that instrument. If I could just put the instrument in the hand of a robot and work with it, and suddenly all that vibration just disappears, and I've got study data proving that that's possible, um, then suddenly I'm not using my brain to try to manage the instrument. All I'm doing is using my brain to focus on patient care. And good surgical robots or good any kind of medical tools allow the surgeon to focus on patient care and not worry about the instruments and tools that they're trying to use. That's the ultimate promise of surgical robotics, as far as I'm concerned.
Let me dovetail into a little tangent here.
Yeah,
How does this work for remote surgeries? Let's go back to your guy in Alaska.
I
I
okay, okay, that's a good point. I personally refer to remote surgery as a stupid pet trick at the moment. It's
okay.
it is for exhibition use, and the only reason for that is okay. So the first Da Vinci remote surgery was between New York and Bangladesh, I think, if I remember correctly, and it was on a dedicated line. It was definitely not over the internet. It was on a nailed connection, and it worked just fine. But here's the thing: there's no shortage of capable trained surgeons in Bangladesh. That's not the problem, right? And so if I can take the whole Da Vinci and just deliver it to Bangladesh, then I can train any surgeon there to do the surgery. That's not the real issue. Now, okay, let's put some asterisks around that. If I've got a Da Vinci in the Antarctic base and somebody needs a complex procedure, well, okay, now I can then go to, where, I'll go to like Chile or something like that. So I have the shortest internet connection. Because I don't think they have any nailed connections between here and the Antarctic. Most of it's dedicated to packet based data. Um, there, we've got a use case. Virtual incision. They make a Da Vinci like remote control robot, and when I say remote control, the remote is typically 6 feet away from the robot. But Virtual Incision did actually do an experiment with the robot portion on the ISS, and the control station was on Earth. So we do know that these things are possible and they're workable. Uh, the recent evacuation that had to be done on the
I'm just
ISS,
going to bring that up. Yeah.
I don't know what the actual medical emergency was, but if it was a surgical emergency, you could have had the robot portion on the ISS, could add a sterile medical bay. Sterility ought to be really easy, just blow the airlocks. But um, and you could then run the control system from Earth. Latency issues. Again, these all this stuff is advancing so fast. It's crazy. In the 90s, latency for just getting a packet from here to an X-25 satellite in low orbit was like 4 seconds. I would not want to be doing surgery if I had a round trip latency of 8 seconds for every single joystick movement. It's not like that anymore. It's incredibly reliable, and I think that's exciting. So, uh, is the use case for remote surgery a must-have on the planet Earth today? Uh, Only in the weird remote cases. Some dude in Alaska, in fact, I do know an orthopedic a surgeon in Alaska who does like one knee, like every 3 or 4 months. He's perfectly trained. He's board certified, but he doesn't have
Yeah.
a constant.
Right.
He doesn't do it all the time,
Right.
right? If he was able to like assist a remote operator, they confer, they use the planning software. With the software, he sets up the robot, he gets the patient under anesthesia, he does the local care, and then lets the remote surgeon like do the final analysis of the exposed bone and go, okay, here, let's cut here and prepare it for the implant. I think that's actually a pretty cool opportunity. It's a little fringy. It'd be a little hard to pay for right now. Shipping a $2 million robot to Nome, Alaska for a
Once
knee
every three
replacement
months. Yeah.
every 3 months,
A
there's an
little
economics
pricey.
problem, but it's not going to be an economics problem forever. The age of the $2 million surgical robot is coming to a close. The surgical robot that I developed, our cost of goods was under $100,000 to build the thing. And we not only were we planning on having a capital expenditure cost that would have been under 500K, but we were actually developing a business model where we were going to just give you the robot on consignment and charge you per use, like about $2,500 per use.
Oh,
And most departments that we talked to were like, yeah, for or the given what this robot was helping skull-based surgeons do, and just some of the early research that we were showing for its potential benefits, we had surgeons literally lining up saying $2,500 per use. I
yeah,
will,
got it.
yeah, no problem. They were happy for that. If your robot costs $2 million, it's hard to amortize, giving away a $2 million robot at $2,500 a shot, right? That's expensive Xeroxing, and it just doesn't work.
So I'm going to
um,
drive this into, and
we'll
I
get
want to
there.
drive this. Okay,
Yeah, we'll get there.
older Gen X baby boomer. What am I going to see as the robots that matter the most to me in the next couple of years? How am I likely to encounter these?
I think you're good.
Heart
I think,
problems, knee
yeah,
problems, hip problems. Where am I going to run into these?
I think what's really cool is you're going to start seeing more. I think you're going to, well, and there's evidence for this. You're going to see more surgical robots that look like just a piece of equipment. The Da Vinci, and I love the Da Vinci. I love Intuitive Surgical. Hi, Dave Rosa, if you happen to be watching. The Da Vinci is an amazing robot, but it's the size of a friggin' RV. It takes up an OR and it pretty much stays there forever, right? A lot of these next generation surgical robots, and the newest Da Vinci is getting there as well. They're like little carts. If you've got it in this OR, and then like somebody down the hall is like, I need that robot, they're just gonna like unplug it and wheel it over. The robot that I worked on, I could plug it in cold, put the instrument in its hand, and be ready to assist the surgeon in under 3 minutes.
Wow.
And I did this in live demos on a regular basis over 8 years. So that's, I think, where you're going to see things go, where you're going to have these really focused robots that are providing a real value service. Like, for example, for cardiothoracic, um, if you're doing those, they go up your vein. The catheter robots. There we go. Little micro catheters. They're a little bit of a hassle to steer. Robots can steer them a lot better than humans can. I mean, there are some humans that can steer those things like it's magic, but how many of them are there compared to all
Right.
of the cardiothoracic surgeons in the world? If you can have a robot that's just a cart that can drive a catheter exactly where it needs to go on the first try, and you don't feel it tugging. And I mean, the worst thing is to feel one of those catheter robots like smack into a vein occlusion or something, and hit it at a weird angle, and you'll feel it. Doesn't matter how much anesthesia you're under, because a lot of those procedures, they're done while you're awake. You're gonna feel it. The robots, there's a company XCath, there's a few others. Those things just steer right up and in. And those kinds of equipment are going to help the patients. They're going to provide real value, and you're going to see them everywhere. And I think that's amazing, because the surgeon, you're going to be in better hands because the surgeon has a better tool. And I think that's the bottom line.
And don't be afraid of the fact that it says robot.
No, not at all. I,
Okay, so we're running out of time here.
yeah.
What question didn't I ask you that I should have?
Um, it goes back to it kind of goes back to the internet discussion we were having. Where's the real magic sauce in a robot? Um, we see the robot, right? It's the big mechanical piece, and my my big thing that I talk about anytime somebody gives me a chance is that the robot itself is like a Trojan horse, because what it's ultimately delivering is incredibly complex, well designed software. In some cases, here's a 25-year-old textbook written by Russ Taylor and Stefan Lavallee, two of the fathers of surgical robotics. This math doesn't change. So this stuff was figured out 25 years ago, which means that the people designing these robots today, that stuff is solved. So now what they're doing is going, how do I help the patient very specifically? And that's all software. The mechanical stuff, like how do I deal with gear ratios and what kind of arm or, what kind of motors do I use? That kind of stuff, that's become real easy. And it wasn't 20 years ago. That stuff was still a head scratcher. Now it's about the software and where can I really take it? Computer vision. There are no surgical robots with AI approved at this time, and I'm very happy about that. Um, but at some point in the future, we will see very narrow capabilities driven by AI that could not be implemented in any other way. They'll have major guardrails, believe me, because I deal with the FDA, so I know what the guardrails are going to look like. But you're going to be safe. And you're safe because the hardware, you're dealing with hardware that was figured out 30 years ago and it's only been refined since then. And now what's really taking care of you is sophisticated, well-written software by just straight up geniuses. I mean, I have the absolute pleasure of working with young, like postdocs and master's students under the tutelage of people like Russell Taylor, one of the fathers of surgical robots. And these are people who are just laser beam focused on patient care. I want to build a piece of software that does this to help a patient recover from this. And their brains are laser focused on solving that problem as safely as possible. That's what you're getting from surgical robots. The robot piece, that's the part that you see. It's where the racing stripes and stickers go, but it's what's inside that really matters.
Dude, it has been awesome talking to you tonight.
Thank you.
I hope you'll come back again because
Would love to.
I have a feeling we could keep going for a while. But I think you've answered my question of what this is all about, and it's been an absolute honor to have you here tonight.
Hey, thank you so much.
This has been 40 Side. We've had the amazing Dave Saunders on tonight. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you again in another week.